We've talked about DOS and FreeDOS and why you might want to use it, but before you'll need to install it. Today I'm going to demonstrate you how to do that by using VirtualBox. Today we're gonna take a real quick look at how to download FreeDOS.org from the internet. It's not really complicated. I guess most of you guys already have downloaded an ISO file from the internet. But still, before there are some questions coming up, I'd like to do this in full and show you how to properly download an ISO file. We're gonna take a little checksum at the end of downloading just to verify the file integrity. And I think it's time to start right now because we want to be real quick today. As you might have guessed, FreeDOS is free, as the name tells you. It's available from the internet. It's an open source operating system based on MS-DOS. We find it on FreeDOS.org. We can read the nice text that the developers have written for us and then click on Download FreeDOS. Today we're going to choose the standard CD-ROM installer. That means that you get an ISO file that you can write to a CD-ROM and then insert into your computer. You can also use it to run VirtualBox, which is the thing that I'm going to do with it, just for the sake of better screen capturing. And I think let's download it. This is going to take some time, obviously, since it's still almost 500 megabytes. Here's a little note about using the CD-ROM standard installer or any kind of installer in VirtualBox. And we're going to take a look at this later, since that's important for us if we are using VirtualBox. The FreeDOS developers also offer a boot floppy or a USB installer, so you can install FreeDOS on a lot of devices. It's compatible with computers that already have USB, but it's also compatible with computers that are as old to just have a floppy to boot from it. Still, it comes with CD-ROM drivers installed out of the box, so you don't really have to worry about that. Let's see how our download is doing. There's 10 seconds left. That looks pretty good. And FreeDOS already offers us a little link here that is called Verify Your Download. We're going to click on that because that's what we're going to do next. We're going to verify our download. And that's pretty easy, at least on Linux. On Windows, you can still find some freeware that is able to do that. Verifying a download is something that I would recommend, but still it's not necessary for the whole deal to function properly. After all, just some verification of the file being downloaded correctly or the source offering you the right file. So let's go to our downloads folder real quick with storage, and as we can see, our download is finished. We got the fd12cd.iso. That's our FreeDOS ISO file. And in order to take a checksum from that, we're going to type in SHA-256 and tab, because Linux already knows what there is to do, and tab again to autofill the fd12cd.iso. Our computer is going to calculate a checksum from that, and we have to compare that to the proper checksum. As you have seen, I have used the SHA-256 sum, so we're going to have to look at this section right here. And since we have the fd12cd.iso, this is the checksum we are looking for. Let's go back to our terminal and compare those two with each other. They seem pretty much to be the same, at least the last digits of them, and I'm happy with that. I think we just have downloaded the right ISO, and now we can start working with it. Let's start installing and using FreeDOS right here in VirtualBox. Obviously, there are multiple ways to do that, and you don't have to use VirtualBox. There's other virtualization programs available, and also you can use FreeDOS for its kind of original purpose, which is to install it on an actual PC. It's possible to install it on old machines or new machines. There are a lot of platforms, and I can't cover all of them right here in this video. But just for the sake of better screen capturing, I decided to stick with VirtualBox. If you want to see how to install FreeDOS with, say, a USB stick or a floppy drive, or how to install it on a really old computer, well, just let me know in the comments below and I will cover that later. So in VirtualBox, we're going to click on New to create a new virtual machine. I'm going to name it FreeDOS, and you can name it anything that you want, but as long as DOS is in the name, VirtualBox will already recognize that we want to create a DOS machine right here, and it's going to adjust the memory and hard disk size and everything like that to it. It suggests us a memory size of 32 megabytes, which is crazy. If you see that DOS is basically a system that was running in the 80s, 32 megabytes of RAM was like unimaginable. So I'm going to go down to the bare minimum that VirtualBox allows us to use, which is 4 megabytes, and that's more than enough for FreeDOS, since FreeDOS will run on as low as 640 kilobytes of RAM. So let's stick with that. We're going to create a virtual hard drive now. VirtualBox suggests us to use 500 megabytes, and I think that's more than enough. I was playing around with FreeDOS quite a bit the last few days, and even with a lot of programs installed, you get around with having, like, say, 200 megabytes of a hard drive. In the 80s, if you were one of those lucky people to be able to afford a computer with a hard drive, which was really expensive back in the days, 128 megabytes was probably something usual. So 500 megabytes fine. It's actually pretty on the high end side. I'm going to use a virtual hard disk as an image file type. If you are used to using VDE, VirtualBox Disk Image, that's fine. That's something that you can easily do. But the advantage of virtual hard disk is that you can easily mount it to multiple operating systems later. So we can mount our virtual hard disk to our host system later and work on it a little bit and transfer some files to it. We're going to cover that later. And that's also what the FreeDOS documentation recommends you to do. Let's stick with dynamically allocated, and let's create the 500 megabyte hard drive. So our FreeDOS machine is created. So what we did right here is basically that we created a virtual computer in our VirtualBox machine. That's pretty similar to having a real computer in front of you. So basically every of those symbols, every of those names here in VirtualBox is kind of a virtual computer. Now, with FreeDOS being marked, let's go to Settings and let's look at some of those. First, in the tab General and Advanced, I like to have the shared clipboard enabled, since I sometimes like to copy some things from my host machine to my guest machine or vice versa. And now let's go to System. We are fine with the 4 megabytes. It's something that we did earlier. It's pretty important that our optical drive is before the hard disk drive in our boot order, since we want to boot from the optical drive later. And now let's go to Processor. Here, FreeDOS recommends to go down with the execution cap a little bit. I'm going to go down to 40% right here. I'm using an Intel Core i5 processor, so I'm not really wondering if this is enough. I'm pretty sure that's more than plenty. It's more processing power than DOS ever was programmed to be used on, so that's fine. The reason for that is just that some programs, or even the kernel of FreeDOS, doesn't really tell the CPU when it's not being needed anymore, or when the execution is not needed anymore. So having an execution cap of 100% could lead to actually permanently using up 100% of one of your CPU cores, and that's not a really comfortable thing to do, since the fan will go up and you will have some noise, and it could slow down your host machine. So for protection of our host machine, we're going to go down to 40% with our execution cap. And the next and last thing we're going to cover in this settings thing is we're going to go to storage, and we're going to insert the FreeDOS CD that we just downloaded. In VirtualBox, I'm able to instantly insert an ISO file. Obviously, in a real machine, this would look a little different, since you would have to burn a CD and then put it into the computer you want to install FreeDOS on. That's basically what we're doing here virtually. Okay, so now our VirtualBox FreeDOS machine is set up, and we are ready to start it and install. So with having FreeDOS being marked, we just click on Start, and here our machine comes up. Let's expand that a little bit. By clicking into this window, I'm gonna let VirtualBox capture my mouse, and from that point on we're gonna just use the keyboard to do whatever we want right here. FreeDOS boots up from the CD-ROM disk and gives us several options, which are installing to hard disk, booting from hard disk, or booting from a disk drive. Obviously, we're going to choose install to hard disk right here by pressing enter, and it's going to show us an error message that was already kind of announced on the downloads page of freedos.org. We have to do a little tweaking with the bootloader, which we didn't, just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to power off the machine right here and redo that again. Let's restart the FreeDOS machine again. And now we're going to do it the correct way. Instead of pressing enter with having the install to hard disk thing marked, we're going to press tab, and we're going to insert space and raw. So what this does is basically that it starts some kind of compatibility mode with VirtualBox. What you maybe already have realized when looking at this path is that FreeDOS is actually using some components of Linux in its whole system, and that's pretty cool. They just want to stay up to date. It's a little different system from the original Microsoft DOS or PC DOS that you might be used to, or that you might still remember. So let's press enter and start the installation. It's going to ask us for our language. You can choose whatever you like right here. I'm going to stick with English. It welcomes us, and there's a little disclaimer right here that tells you that this installer could actually break something on your computer, and we are fine with that. And so it now actually wants to break something on our computer, or otherwise said, it wants to partition our hard drive, which is something that's absolutely necessary since our hard drive is really new and it's not partitioned right now. So let's allow it to do that. It's going to do that automatically. And then it's going to ask us to reboot the machine. which we're going to do again. And we're going to reboot it from our CD-ROM drive, since basically nothing has happened really. It's just our hard drive being able to be used. And we're going to have to use the raw option again, since otherwise we would run into the error message that we saw earlier. So let's start it again with the raw option. And what happens now basically is the same thing that happened before. We're going to continue with our installation, but the first two questions are pretty similar to what we've seen before. We want to proceed with the installation, and now it's not going to ask us to partition the drive, or rather it's going to ask us to erase and format drive C, which is something that we're going to do. It's going to give us some information about our drive. It's roughly 500 megabytes, which we selected earlier in VirtualBox when creating the drive, and some additional information. And if we don't press a key, it starts automatically formatting and doing the stuff that it usually does. For now, I'm going to stick with US English. In the keyboard layout, you can choose whatever you want to choose right here. And now, depending on what we want to do, we can choose if we want to install the base packages only, or if we want to have a full installation. Obviously, with our high-end hardware of 4 megabytes of RAM and the 500 megabytes hard drive, which is really on the high-end side of resources, we're gonna choose the full installation with sources. We're really gonna rock it today, and proceed with the installation. By the way, if you were wondering how to use that whole thing, you basically just using the arrow keys and the enter key to navigate in the whole installation program. That's something that was done in the 80s when you used a text-based wizard program. It's also done nowadays in some Linux distributions that don't come with a graphical installer, and it's a pretty nice thing if you are used to that. As you can see, this goes kind of fast. It's a pretty fast installation when you were installing the DOS versions, the original DOS versions of Microsoft DOS from a disk drive to a hard disk. It would probably have taken a little bit longer. It would have made some noise, and you had to insert a new disk every now and then. I remember that Microsoft DOS 6.22, which was the first operating system that I ever used, was running on 3 floppy disks that you all had to insert into your computer while installing, and after that you were able to boot Microsoft DOS from your hard drive. So now FreeDOS is installed, and we're gonna reboot to our system, and that's also gonna go kind of fast. Since our CD is still inserted to our system, for now we're not gonna have to choose install to hard disk. We're rather gonna boot from our system hard disk. We can skip this whole step by just not inserting any kind of CD. I wasn't fast enough to get it out right here, so we're gonna have to work with this CD screen. I'm going to choose the expanded memory option right here. If you don't choose anything, it's gonna automatically choose for you. And that should be it. Here we go. Usually boot up is gonna go a little faster, but for the first boot, this is nothing unusual. So now we're in DOS. We can use DOS as we are used to. And that's pretty much what I wanted to show you in this video. But I'm gonna go with a little comment right here before we're gonna wrap this up. I'm going to go with the command mem. And this is going to show us the free memory of our machine. We're going to see that currently we are using up 886 kilobytes of memory, and there are 3146 kilobytes of memory free. So 4 MB is really a lot of this. And if you see that most of the memory that is in use currently is actually just reserved, or as you would say in Linux nowadays, probably it is cached. So okay, I think we're gonna shut down the machine right here. Thanks for watching and God bless you.